The sprawling, opulent mansion loomed before Lily, a monstrous testament to unchecked wealth, its polished stone reflecting the setting sun like a mocking eye. Every sculpted bush, every soaring column, every perfectly manicured blade of grass felt like a personal affront. A shiver, not of cold, but of simmering resentment, traced its way down her spine. It had been years, but the memory was as vivid, as scorching, as if it had happened yesterday. She could still hear the shrill, disdainful voice of Mrs. Sterling echoing through those very halls, accusing her mother, Maria, of something so petty, so degrading, it had stripped away a piece of her mother's soul. The humiliation had been palpable, a suffocating blanket woven from malice and class prejudice. This house, this kingdom of the Sterlings, was not just a place where her mother worked. It was a scar on their family's dignity, a constant, painful reminder of where they stood in the world. But it was also a crucible, forging within Lily a steely resolve, a quiet, burning ambition that had grown with every passing year. This memory, raw and unyielding, was the fuel that propelled her forward, a silent vow whispered to the heavens that things would not always be this way. Please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Lily was a young woman marked by an unusual blend of quiet intensity and formidable intellect. Her eyes, often downcast in a posture of respectful humility, missed nothing. They absorbed the world with an almost photographic precision. From a modest background, she had learned early on the harsh lessons of inequality, lessons taught not through lectures, but through the daily grind of her mother's life. Maria, Lily's mother, was a woman of unwavering integrity and gentle spirit, whose hands, despite years of arduous labor, still possessed a remarkable kindness. She had worked for the Sterling family for over a decade, her quiet competence and unwavering loyalty often taken for granted, sometimes even openly scorned. Lily adored her mother, a love that transcended words, a fierce, protective bond that had only strengthened with each passing slight Maria endured. Lily possessed an exceptional memory, a faculty that bordered on eidetic recall. She could remember entire conversations, pages of text, intricate details, all with astonishing clarity. This rare gift, coupled with an insatiable curiosity, meant she devoured books, articles, and anything that could expand her understanding of the world, especially the world beyond their small, rented apartment. She was relentless in her pursuit of knowledge, driven by an almost spiritual belief that knowledge was power, the only true equalizer in a society so starkly divided by wealth and privilege. Her dreams were not fantastical. They were grounded in the tangible reality of a better life for Maria and herself, a life free from the indignities of servitude, a life where her mother's inherent worth was recognized and respected. Lily envisioned a future where Maria's tired hands could finally rest, where her gentle spirit could flourish without the constant burden of others' disdain. It was this vision, sharp and clear, that guided her every decision, every late-night study session, every moment of her quiet, purposeful existence. The catalyst that had cemented Lily's determination, that had transformed her quiet resilience into an unshakable resolve, occurred during one particularly unforgiving summer. It began with an overheard whisper, then escalated into an open accusation. Mrs. Sterling, a woman whose vanity was matched only by her capriciousness, had noticed a small, antique silver locket missing from her vanity table. Without a moment's hesitation, without an ounce of evidence, her gaze had fallen directly upon Maria. The accusation, delivered with icy disdain, cut Maria to the quick. "Maria, I believe you've misplaced my locket," Mrs. Sterling had purred, though the intonation clearly implied theft, not misplacement. Perhaps it's fallen into your bag by accident. The insinuation was unmistakable, a thinly veiled charge delivered with a cruel smile. Maria, her face paling to an ashen gray, had stammered denials, her hands trembling as she emptied her pockets, displaying their meager contents. Lily, then only 17, had been helping her mother in the kitchen, a common practice during school breaks to earn extra money. She had witnessed the entire degrading spectacle from the doorway, hidden in the shadows, her blood running cold with a mixture of shame and searing anger. The locket, of course, was eventually found, tucked away beneath a pile of silk scarves by Mrs. Sterling herself, who offered a dismissive, "Oh, there it is. My mistake," without a shred of genuine apology. But the damage had been done. The casual cruelty, the readiness to accuse, the utter disregard for Maria's character had left an indelible mark. Maria had returned home that day, not just physically exhausted, but emotionally broken, her spirit dimmed, her eyes clouded with an unshed sorrow that Lily could not bear to witness. This incident, an act of sheer, unadulterated injustice, became the line in the sand for Lily. It solidified her burning desire to not only clear her mother's name, but to prove, unequivocally, their inherent worth to an uncaring world, and most importantly, to themselves. From that day on, Lily understood that silent suffering was no longer an option. She would find a way to reclaim their dignity, cost what it may. The unjust accusation against Maria settled over their small apartment like a suffocating shroud, heavy and cold. Lily watched, her heart clenching, as her mother's usually vibrant spirit dimmed. Maria, a woman who had faced countless hardships with quiet dignity, now moved with a palpable weariness, her shoulders slumped, her gaze often distant. The humiliation had not only bruised her pride, but seemed to ripple through her physical well-being. A persistent, hacking cough developed, stealing her sleep, and the worry lines etched around her eyes deepened into furrows of profound distress. Lily often found her mother staring blankly at the chipped kitchen counter, tears silently tracing paths down her worn cheeks, the unspoken burden of being branded a thief weighing heavier than any physical labor. This wasn't just about a stolen trinket. It was about the theft of her mother's good name, her integrity, the very essence of her hard-working life. A fierce protective instinct ignited within Lily. She would not stand by and watch her mother wither under the weight of such an egregious lie. This wasn't merely about clearing a name. It was about restoring a soul. Her quiet determination, often mistaken for meekness, hardened into an unshakable resolve. Late into the nights, while Maria finally found fitful sleep, Lily would pore over old newspapers and rudimentary online archives, researching the Sterling family. She delved into their business dealings, their public image, even their philanthropic gestures, searching for any inconsistency, any weakness, any crack in their gleaming facade. She felt an underlying malice in how Mrs. Sterling had so easily dismissed Maria's decades of loyal service, an almost gleeful disregard for a human being's reputation. It wasn't just a mistake. It was an exercise of power, a casual cruelty that festered in Lily's mind. The embodiment of this casual cruelty, Mr. Sterling himself, was everything Lily despised about unearned privilege. He was a man whose expensive suits seemed to stretch across a chest puffed up with self-importance, his voice an amplified drone designed to fill any room with his own undeniable presence. His smirk, a permanent fixture on his lips, spoke volumes of his conviction that the world existed solely for his amusement and convenience. He rarely addressed Lily directly, instead offering a dismissive wave or a fleeting, indifferent glance that made her feel invisible, a part of the household furniture. His casual dismissal of Maria's reputation after the incident was particularly infuriating, as if a servant's honor held no more weight than a discarded receipt. His wife, Mrs. Sterling, was his perfect counterpart, sharp-tongued, overly coiffed, and possessed of an almost aristocratic disdain for anyone who wasn't part of her exclusive social strata. Her judgments were swift, final, and often delivered with a condescending sweetness that was far more potent than outright anger. They were a formidable, deeply entrenched obstacle, their wealth and influence casting a long, intimidating shadow. Lily knew she couldn't directly confront Mr. Sterling. That would be futile, even dangerous. Her first instinct, born of a desperate hope, was to appeal to Mrs. Sterling, woman to woman, mother to mother. She waited for an opportunity, catching Mrs. Sterling one afternoon as she walked through the manicured gardens, speaking animatedly into a diamond-encrusted phone. When Mrs. Sterling finally concluded her call, Lily approached, her heart thudding against her ribs. "Mrs. Sterling," Lily began, her voice carefully modulated, "I wanted to speak to you about my mother, Maria." Mrs. Sterling turned, her perfectly arched eyebrows rising slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her face before it settled into a mask of polite indifference. "Yes, dear? What about Maria? I believe her services are no longer required." "She is innocent, Mrs. Sterling," Lily pressed on, ignoring the subtle dismissal. "She would never steal. Our family has always valued honesty above all else. This accusation has deeply distressed her, and it's affecting her health." Mrs. Sterling let out a short, hollow laugh, a sound devoid of genuine amusement. "Distressed? Oh, please. Servants always get distressed when they're caught. It's a rather predictable performance, isn't it? Honestly, Lily, I thought you were smarter than this. Your mother was given a chance and she squandered it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a charity luncheon to attend." She waved a dismissive hand, turning her back on Lily, effectively ending the conversation. The coldness of her dismissal, the casual cruelty of her words, stung Lily far more deeply than she had anticipated. It was a stark reminder of the chasm between their worlds. Undeterred by the rebuff, Lily then shifted her strategy. If direct appeal failed, she would gather irrefutable proof. She spent hours researching legal precedents, trying to understand how one could establish innocence when guilt had been so casually presumed by those in power. She attempted to speak with other staff members, discreetly asking if they had seen anything unusual, anything that might shed light on the alleged theft. But fear, a palpable thing in the Sterling household, kept their lips sealed. No one dared risk the Sterlings' displeasure. It became clear that the family's influence extended far beyond their property lines, making any independent investigation an uphill battle. Every door Lily tried to open seemed to slam shut in her face, reinforced by the Sterlings' vast network and their casual disregard for anyone they deemed beneath them. The sheer omnipresence of their power, the way it permeated every aspect of their lives and those around them, felt suffocating. Yet, each setback, each act of condescension only solidified Lily's resolve. She would not back down, not when her mother's very spirit was at stake. Maria's health, already fragile from years of arduous work and the weight of an unfair accusation, deteriorated significantly in the wake of Mrs. Sterling's cruel dismissal. The stress etched deeper lines onto her face, dimmed the light in her eyes, and sapped her once vibrant spirit. Each day, Lily watched her mother grow weaker, her movements slower, her laughter replaced by a haunting silence that filled their small apartment. The injustice festered in Lily's heart, a slow-burning fire that threatened to consume her. She spent countless sleepless nights by Maria's bedside, listening to her shallow breathing, feeling a cold dread creep into her bones. The doctors spoke of stress-induced complications, a weakening immune system, and a profound sadness that seemed to envelop Maria entirely. Lily felt helpless, observing her mother's decline, a decline directly linked to the Sterling's casual cruelty. One evening, while discreetly delivering a late-night snack to the Sterling's master suite, a chore Maria was too ill to perform, Lily inadvertently overheard a conversation that would forever alter her perspective. The door was slightly ajar, and Mr. Sterling's booming, self-satisfied voice carried clearly into the hallway. "Honestly, darling," he drawled, "the audacity of these people. They think they're owed something simply for existing. That maid of yours, Maria, truly thought she could get away with that little trinket. A classic, really. They always try to pilfer something small, hoping we won't notice." Mrs. Sterling's tinkling laugh, sharp and devoid of warmth, followed. "Oh, she did, didn't she? The way she looked, all wide-eyed and innocent. It was almost comical. But one must maintain standards, Richard. Otherwise they'd walk all over us. A little scare now and then keeps them in line, reminds them of their place." Lily's blood ran cold. It wasn't just Maria's reputation they toyed with. It was her life, her dignity, her very essence. Their words, dripping with contempt and an almost gleeful exercise of power, ignited a fire within Lily that surpassed mere determination. It was a fierce resolve, a righteous anger that transformed her quiet resilience into an unyielding force. She no longer merely wanted to clear her mother's name. She wanted to expose their hypocrisy, to shatter their gilded cage of privilege and cruelty. The Sterling mansion, once a symbol of her mother's hard work, now felt like a fortress of injustice, and Lily, a solitary warrior, knew she had to find a way to breach its walls. As fate would have it, a chance encounter provided her with an unlikely ally. Mr. Arthur Henderson, an elderly gentleman with a shock of white hair and keen, intelligent eyes, lived a few blocks from Lily. He had been a colleague of Lily's late father, a respected but modest accountant, and had known Lily since she was a small child. He was a retired lawyer, known in his prime for his razor-sharp intellect and an unwavering commitment to justice, often taking on pro bono cases for those who could not afford representation. He had observed Lily's silent struggles, the way she carried herself with a quiet dignity despite the obvious burdens. One afternoon, he found her sitting on a park bench, lost in thought, a legal textbook open on her lap. He approached her gently, offering a kind word and striking up a conversation. Impressed by her intelligence, her burning sense of justice, and her raw, untamed potential, Mr. Henderson began to offer discreet guidance. He recognized in Lily a spirit reminiscent of her father, a man he deeply respected. He advised her not on emotional pleas or direct confrontation, but on strategic thinking, on understanding the adversary, and, crucially, on exploiting their weaknesses. The powerful Lily, he stated, his voice a gravelly whisper, often have the largest egos. They flaunt what they believe makes them superior, but those very displays can be their undoing. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight it with intellect, with precision, with a deeper understanding of the game. He became her unofficial mentor, a quiet guide who saw her potential and helped her hone it into a formidable weapon. Under Mr. Henderson's tutelage, Lily embarked on an intense personal training regimen, though not of the physical kind. Her focus was entirely on mental acuity, language skills, and public speaking, specifically targeting the areas she knew the Sterlings valued and ostentatiously flaunted. She devoured books on finance, economics, and law, her photographic memory serving as an invaluable asset. Mr. Henderson provided her with old legal briefs, complex financial reports, and obscure academic papers, challenging her to not only understand their content, but to commit them to memory. He taught her the nuances of persuasive rhetoric, the power of a well-placed word, and the art of commanding attention. They spent hours discussing the Sterlings' business dealings, their public persona, and the subtle ways they maintained their image. Mr. Henderson helped Lily understand the psychological underpinnings of their arrogance, explaining that their displays of wealth and intellectual superiority were often a facade, a shield against their own insecurities. He taught her to identify the cracks in that facade, to recognize the specific language they used, the mannerisms they adopted, and the type of challenges they would typically issue to assert dominance. Lily practiced speaking in front of a mirror, refining her pronunciation, modulating her tone, and developing an air of confident composure. She immersed herself in high society etiquette guides, not to emulate them, but to understand their world, their expectations, and how best to subvert them. She knew that to challenge the Sterlings effectively, she had to speak their language, but with a clarity and precision they utterly lacked. Her goal was no longer merely vindication. It was a carefully orchestrated act of intellectual dominance, a quiet revolution executed with words, aimed directly at the heart of their inflated pride. Every night, after tending to her mother, Lily would pore over her studies, the weight of Maria's suffering fueling her relentless pursuit of knowledge, shaping her into the weapon she needed to become. The night of the annual Sterling Gala arrived, casting its usual dazzling, almost oppressive glow over the exclusive hillside neighborhood. Limousines snaked up the winding driveway, depositing Manhattan's elite onto a red carpet flanked by impeccably uniformed staff. The mansion itself was a beacon of ostentation, every window ablaze with light, every surface gleaming. Inside, crystal chandeliers dripped opulence, illuminating rivers of champagne and mountains of caviar. Maria, still frail but resolute, had pleaded with Lily not to go, fearing further humiliation. "Lily, please, it's not our place," she had whispered, her voice laced with worry. But Lily's resolve was unshakable. This was not about place. It was about reclaiming it. Against her mother's desperate wishes, Lily decided to attend, but not as a guest. She borrowed one of her mother's older, clean, but distinctly modest maid uniforms. It was a calculated disguise, not out of shame, but for strategy. It would grant her virtually invisible access, allowing her to move through the glittering crowd unremarked, to observe, to listen, to position herself. With a tray of untouched hors d'oeuvres, she blended seamlessly into the background, her eyes scanning, her ears straining, every fiber of her being alert. She watched Mr. Sterling, a corpulent man radiating self-satisfaction. His wife, Mrs. Sterling, a brittle figure draped in diamonds, both holding court, surrounded by a sycophantic chorus of equally wealthy guests. The air was thick with superficial laughter and back-patting compliments. Lily felt a surge of cold determination. This was their arena, but tonight she would subtly shift the dynamics. As the evening wore on and the champagne flowed more freely, Mr. Sterling's booming voice grew louder, his gestures more expansive. He moved to the grand balcony overlooking the moonlit ocean, drawing a crowd of increasingly intoxicated, admiring guests. The Sterling's colossal luxury yacht, the Opulence, lay anchored in the bay below, a shimmering behemoth of privilege, its lights reflecting on the dark water. Mr. Sterling, clearly well into his cups, spread his arms wide, encompassing the yacht and the adoring throng. He began to boast, his voice thick with smugness, about his vast wealth, his unparalleled business acumen, his ability to acquire anything he desired. He spoke of investments, of deals, of the sheer genius required to navigate the treacherous waters of high finance. Then, in a sudden, slurred attempt to entertain his guests, his eyes sweeping over the faces before him, perhaps seeking a new form of amusement, he devised a challenge. "You know," he announced, his words punctuated by a self-important chuckle, "people always think wealth is about luck. It's not. It's about intellect. It's about knowing things others don't. It's about being able to grasp the nuances, the complexities." He gestured dramatically towards the yacht. "See that beauty? My opulence. Some of you might dream of owning such a vessel, eh? Well, I tell you what." His voice dropped conspiratorially, though still loud enough to carry across the balcony. "I have here, in my pocket," he fumbled, producing a folded, aged document. "A passage. A rather obscure, highly technical passage from an old business valuation report, full of jargon, mind you, financial speak. If anyone here, anyone at all," he stressed, his gaze challenging, "can flawlessly recite this passage, word for word, without a single mistake, understanding every term down to its deepest meaning. If they can do that, I swear, on my father's grave, I will give them my yacht, free and clear. Title transferred tomorrow morning." A ripple of nervous titters and uncomfortable laughter spread through the crowd. No one dared to take him seriously, yet no one wanted to risk looking foolish. His intention was undeniably clear: to mock his guests' presumed lack of serious business knowledge, to remind them of his unchallenged intellectual superiority, even in a drunken state. He wanted to highlight the vast chasm between his world of complex financial understanding and their superficial grasp of wealth. It was a power play, pure and simple, designed to reassert his dominance. Lily, from her hidden vantage point near a potted palm, a strategically placed barrier between her and the direct gaze of the Sterlings, felt a jolt of recognition. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind remained ice-cold. She recognized the document. It was one of the many obscure Sterling's corporation papers Mr. Henderson had given her, a forgotten, heavily footnoted valuation report from the early days of one of their subsidiaries. She had spent weeks dissecting it, committing its dense language and intricate calculations to memory, not because it held any particular legal leverage, but because it was precisely the kind of arcane text the Sterlings would consider definitive proof of intellectual prowess. It was riddled with complex terms, discounted cash flow analysis, put options with embedded volatility adjustments, seigniorage rights in emerging markets, terms that only a true expert or, she realized with a chilling certainty, someone with an eidetic memory like hers, honed by weeks of relentless study, would recall with such precision. A profound silence descended as guests exchanged awkward glances, each hoping someone else would step forward, or that Mr. Sterling would simply forget his ridiculous pronouncement. He stood there, swaying slightly, the document held aloft like a trophy. A smug, contemptuous smirk plastered across his face, clearly relishing the discomfort he had created. He surveyed the wealthy faces, daring them, taunting them with his impossible challenge. Lily's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment Mr. Henderson had prepared her for. This was the crack in their facade, the very challenge designed to expose superficiality, that she, armed with true knowledge and quiet diligence, could turn on its head. A fierce, unwavering resolve settled over her. She would accept the challenge. She would do it for her mother. She would do it to expose the hollow core of their arrogance. The opulent annual Sterling Gala was in full swing, a dazzling display of wealth and superficiality that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. Mr. Sterling, a man whose ego seemed to inflate with every glass of champagne, was holding court near the sprawling French doors that opened onto the immaculately manicured gardens. His voice, amplified by his self-importance, carried across the murmuring crowd as he gestured grandly towards the sparkling expanse of the ocean where his magnificent yacht, the Neptune's Kiss, lay anchored, a beacon of his immense fortune. He was mid-boast, his face flushed with self-satisfaction, surrounded by a sycophantic circle of guests who hung on his every word, their forced smiles a testament to their desire for continued favor. "You see that beauty?" he slurred, pointing a heavily ringed finger at the vessel. "Finest piece of craftsmanship money can buy. A true testament to intellectual prowess, wouldn't you agree?" A few polite chuckles rippled through his audience. He then leaned in conspiratorially, his eyes glinting with a mischievous, almost cruel delight. "I'll tell you what, I'm feeling generous tonight. If anyone here can flawlessly recite without a single stutter or mistake this passage—" He brandished a crumpled yellow document he pulled from his breast pocket, its aged parchment looking incongruous against his crisp tuxedo. "This rather specific passage from this obscure yet exceptionally important business document I will give them the Neptune's Kiss, my yacht, yours, free and clear. Who among you gentlemen and ladies possesses such uncommon intellectual rigor?" His eyes scanned the room, lingering on a few faces he knew to be highly educated, yet he knew with absolute certainty that none of them, despite their impressive resumes, would have encountered this particular esoteric text. It was a passage from an ancient, practically forgotten legal precedent concerning maritime trade agreements and obscure taxation loopholes, a document Mr. Sterling himself had only stumbled upon years ago and found amusingly complex. He fully expected a chorus of nervous titters and self-deprecating admissions of inadequacy, solidifying his intellectual dominance in the room. But then, a subtle ripple spread through the crowd. From the shadowed corner near the service entrance, a figure emerged. It was Lily, no longer in the maid's uniform she had used to slip past security, but now dressed in a simple yet elegant dark dress that somehow managed to convey both defiance and quiet dignity. Her hair, usually pulled back severely, was now softened around her face, giving her an unexpected, almost ethereal presence amidst the garish glamour. Her appearance was a stark contrast to the flamboyant attire of the other guests, yet her silent progress commanded an undeniable attention. There was a faint gasp from one of the caterers, a recognition of her familiar face, but Mr. Sterling, consumed by his own grandstanding, barely registered her until she was almost directly in front of him. With a surge of courage that resonated deep within her bones, a courage born of all the indignities her mother had suffered, Lily stepped forward. Her gaze, steady and unflinching, met Mr. Sterling's smug, expectant eyes. The low hum of conversation that had filled the ballroom slowly died down, replaced by a tense, expectant silence. Every eye in the room was now fixed on the young woman who had dared to interrupt the billionaire's performance. "I will attempt the challenge, Mr. Sterling," Lily stated, her voice clear and surprisingly resonant, cutting through the thick, perfumed air. It was not a plea, but a declaration, delivered with an unshakable confidence that belied her humble origins. A wave of murmurs swept through the assembled guests. A few polite titters could be heard, quickly hushed by the sheer audacity of her statement. Mr. Sterling's face, initially contorted in a sneer of amusement, shifted to one of genuine surprise, then quickly settled back into an even more condescending smirk. He actually let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Well, well, what do we have here? A little sparrow trying to outwit an eagle, eh?" He scoffed, waving the document languidly. "And who might you be, my dear? I don't believe I've had the pleasure." His tone was dripping with disdain, a blatant attempt to belittle her, to remind everyone of her presumed place. Lily ignored the insult, her composure unwavering. "My name is Lily, Mr. Sterling, and I accept your challenge." Mr. Sterling, still reveling in his assumed superiority, finally handed her the crumpled parchment. He expected her to fumble, to squint at the illegible script, to stammer her way through a few lines before gracefully retreating. Instead, Lily took the document, her fingers brushing against his, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. She glanced at the page for a mere second, her photographic memory instantly absorbing every single character, every comma, every obscure term. Then, she handed it back to him without a word, her gaze still locked on his. A hush fell over the entire ballroom, so profound that the distant lapping of waves against the yacht could almost be heard. Every breath seemed held captive, every eye riveted on Lily. In that moment of absolute silence, Lily began to speak. Her voice, initially soft, grew in strength and clarity, filling the grand room with an extraordinary resonance. Regarding the jurisdictional intricacies of international maritime liens, specifically concerning Article 4, subsection B, paragraph 3 of the 1889 Brussels Convention on the Unification of Certain Rules of Law relating to assistance and salvage at sea, it is unequivocally stipulated that any claim for salvage remuneration, despite its inherent equitable nature, shall be superseded by pre-existing statutory encumbrances registered within the vessel's sovereign flag state, provided said encumbrances are demonstrably non-contingent and have been disclosed pre-voyage to all parties engaged in commerce within the littoral zone. Furthermore, the force majeure clause, as explicated in the subsequent 1901 addendum concerning unforeseen meteorological phenomena, explicitly excludes acts of owner negligence resulting in structural compromise, thereby rendering void any claim for indemnification predicated upon such circumstances under the purview of international arbitration protocols implemented in the Hague Tribunal, subsection Sabian, Appendix C. The financial implications, therefore, are contingent upon a rigorous evidentiary review establishing the precise locus of culpability, notwithstanding any de facto possession claims, and demanding a comprehensive audit of all transactional records pertaining to vessel maintenance and operational expenditures dating back no less than 60 calendar months. Every word, every comma, every complex legal and financial term poured from her lips with flawless pronunciation and an astonishing comprehension that imbued the dry, convoluted language with an unexpected power. There was no hesitation, no stumble, no searching for the next phrase. It was as if she had not merely memorized the passage, but had internalized its very essence, understanding its intricate web of definitions and exceptions. Mr. Sterling's initial smirk, a fixture on his face, began to falter only a few sentences in. His jaw, which had been set in an arrogant slant, slowly dropped. His eyes, initially gleaming with dismissive amusement, widened in disbelief. The champagne glass he held, forgotten, began to tremble slightly in his hand. The guests, who had expected a quick, embarrassing failure, were now utterly transfixed, their faces a tableau of stunned silence and dawning astonishment. A few audible gasps punctuated the air, as if a collective breath had been stolen from their lungs. This was not just recitation. This was an intellectual performance of the highest order, delivered by someone they had all dismissed. The final word echoed through the vast ballroom, clear and resonant, hanging in the air like a perfectly struck bell. Silence, thick and absolute, enveloped the room. Lily stood tall, her gaze unwavering, fixed directly on Mr. Sterling. The last syllable had left her lips with the effortless grace of a seasoned orator. Every complex term, every intricate clause, every single numerical figure delivered with flawless precision and an almost unnerving comprehension. The deep, intricate understanding of the document, far beyond mere memorization, was palpable in her delivery. She hadn't just recited words. She had embodied their meaning, making the obtuse financial jargon suddenly accessible, almost poetic. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the room erupted. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered elite, followed by a torrent of murmurs that quickly swelled into a wave of astonished applause. It wasn't the polite, measured clapping of a society event. It was genuine, heartfelt appreciation for an impossible feat. Guests who minutes ago had been whispering snidely about the audacity of a maid's daughter now stared, utterly transfixed, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Mr. Sterling, the arrogant billionaire who had initiated this cruel charade, stood frozen, his jaw slack, his face a ghastly shade of pale. His initial smirk, the one that had promised an evening of cruel amusement at another's expense, had vanished completely. He blinked, slowly, once, then again, his eyes wide with a shock that bordered on terror. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on him, visible to every single person in the room. His carefully constructed facade of invincibility had not just cracked, it had shattered into a million pieces. Lily, seizing the moment, her voice firm and ringing with a quiet authority, took another step forward. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her tone devoid of malice but brimming with conviction, "you offered your yacht as a prize. Yet, moments before, you allowed your wife to accuse my mother, Maria, of theft, a woman who has served your family with loyalty and dignity for years. That passage, sir, the one I just recited, speaks of integrity, transparency, and the ethical stewardship of assets. Values, it seems, that are as foreign to your actions as genuine humility is to your character." A new wave of murmurs, this time of agreement and discomfort, swept through the guests. Lily continued, her eyes now sweeping across the faces of the stunned attendees, making direct eye contact with many of the city's most influential figures. "My mother's only crime, it seems, was her honesty and her hard-working nature, qualities that, in this household, are apparently considered liabilities. The accusation was baseless, cruel, and designed to humiliate. It not only wounded her spirit, but threatened her livelihood." She paused, allowing her words to sink in before delivering her next, carefully constructed blow. "And while we are discussing integrity and ethical stewardship, perhaps we should also discuss the subtle discrepancies in the quarterly earnings report from 2017, specifically the adjustment in the miscellaneous expenses category that coincides precisely with the period of your speculative investments in the defunct Phoenix Solutions venture, a venture that, according to Clause 17B of the Sterling Holdings Diversification Strategy document, required board approval, which was, conspicuously, never obtained. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Mr. Sterling visibly flinched, his eyes darting wildly. The mention of specific dates, obscure clauses, and a defunct company that he had discreetly swept under the rug was a direct hit. It was clear Lily possessed knowledge far beyond what anyone, especially him, could have imagined. Every word was a calculated thrust, delivered with the precision of a master surgeon. The guests, many of whom were investors or business rivals, now looked at Mr. Sterling with a chilling intensity, their earlier amusement replaced by suspicion and a dawning understanding of the true stakes. Lily wasn't just performing a parlor trick, she was exposing a deeper rot. His face now a sickly green, Mr. Sterling stammered, attempting to regain control, to dismiss her words. "Now look here, young woman, that is quite enough. You have no business bringing up old, irrelevant. These are personal matters." His voice, usually booming with authority, was reedy and thin, laced with panic. He tried to appeal to his guests, his eyes pleading, but found no sympathy. Instead, he was met with cold, assessing stares, some openly hostile. The influential figures he had so desperately sought to impress were now seeing him not as the powerful tycoon, but as a cornered petty bully, exposed and vulnerable. His veneer of respectability crumbled under the weight of Lily's calm, unwavering accusations, each word a testament to his hypocrisy. The yacht, that symbol of his unshakable wealth and dominance, now seemed a paltry prize compared to the catastrophic damage Lily had inflicted upon his most prized possession. His reputation. He had walked into his own trap, and the maid's daughter had sprung it with a devastating elegance, leaving him utterly, publicly humiliated before his peers, his enemies, and himself. His empire, built on a foundation of arrogance and dismissive disregard for others, was now shaking, threatened by the very honesty he so disdained. The reverberations of that night at the Sterling Gala spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles and beyond. Social media buzzed with whispers and then outright declarations. News outlets, initially hesitant to report on what seemed like a society scandal, were soon inundated with tips and eyewitness accounts. Lily's precise, damning recitation, followed by her calm, articulate exposé of Mr. Sterling's hypocrisy and questionable financial dealings, had ripped through the fabric of his carefully constructed public image. The Sterlings, once unassailable, found their names dragged through the mud, their lavish lives now viewed through a lens of suspicion and contempt. Overnight, their carefully cultivated facade of respectability had shattered, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The damage to Mr. Sterling's reputation was catastrophic. His business partners, keen observers of public sentiment, and always eager to distance themselves from scandal, began quietly withdrawing their support. Calls went unreturned, meetings were mysteriously postponed, and whispers of investigations into his past financial maneuvers grew louder. The city's power brokers, who had once courted Mr. Sterling's favor, now openly shunned him. Mrs. Sterling, whose social standing had been her life's currency, found herself ostracized. Her charity committees suddenly dissolved, her invitations mysteriously rescinded. They were pariahs, their opulent mansion now feeling like a gilded cage. Cornered and desperate, facing not only public scorn but the very real threat of legal repercussions, Mr. Sterling had no choice but to concede. The pressure from his dwindling allies, combined with the subtle but persistent counsel from his own legal team, forced his hand. He issued a public statement, devoid of his usual arrogance, a strained apology delivered through clenched teeth, admitting to the unfounded and regrettable accusation against Maria, and offering her immediate and substantial financial compensation for her suffering and distress. It was a humiliating capitulation for a man who had never before apologized for anything. A bitter pill he was forced to swallow in the desperate hope of salvaging what little remained of his empire. Maria's name was officially cleared, her dignity restored, not by the Sterling's grace, but by Lily's fierce determination. Then came the matter of the yacht. The infamous challenge, made in a moment of drunken hubris, had been witnessed by hundreds and recorded by many more on their phones. There was no escaping it. The yacht, a gleaming symbol of Mr. Sterling's immeasurable wealth, now stood as a monument to his utter defeat. Weeks later, with a palpable sense of outrage and barely contained fury, Mr. Sterling was forced to formally transfer the ownership of his beloved yacht, the Sovereign, into Lily's name. The paperwork was handled by a grim-faced solicitor, witnessed by a resentful Mr. Sterling, who glowered throughout the entire process, his eyes burning with a hatred that Lily returned with a calm, unwavering gaze. He had lost, utterly and completely, and the tangible proof of his loss was now legally hers. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all Lily, who knew exactly what this transaction represented, not just a yacht, but a victory for justice. Lily, however, had no illusions about the yacht itself. While a magnificent vessel, its opulent interiors and high-maintenance demands were far from her aspirations. She wasn't interested in a life of luxury defined by such excess. She had fought for justice, for her mother's honor, not for material possessions. Immediately, she consulted with Mr. Henderson. The elderly lawyer, beaming with pride at his protégé's triumph, advised her on the most strategic way to handle her new asset. Together, they navigated the complexities of selling such a high-value item, ensuring transparency and maximizing the return. The sale was swift, attracting considerable media attention once again. With the significant proceeds from the sale of the Sovereign, Lily wasted no time. Her experiences, particularly her mother's unjust treatment and the casual disregard shown by the Sterlings, had ignited a deeper purpose within her. She envisioned a future where no domestic worker would endure such humiliation or lack of recourse. Under Mr. Henderson's careful guidance, Lily established a foundation, the Maria's Voice Foundation. Its mission was clear and impactful: to provide free legal aid, emotional support, and advocacy for domestic workers who had been mistreated, exploited, or falsely accused by their employers. The foundation quickly gained traction. Its initial funding, primarily from the yacht's sale, allowed them to rent a small office, hire dedicated staff, and begin outreach programs. Lily's own story, now widely known, lent immense credibility to the cause. She spoke passionately at community events, drawing attention to the often invisible struggles faced by domestic workers. She used her newfound platform to educate the public, to lobby for stronger labor protections, and to ensure that those who cleaned, cooked, and cared for the nation's households were treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. The yacht, once a symbol of egregious wealth and power, had been transformed, literally and figuratively, into a beacon of hope and justice for the vulnerable, echoing Lily's unyielding belief that true power lay not in accumulation, but in empowerment. Her strategic move was not just about the money. It was about shifting the narrative, turning an emblem of oppression into an engine for liberation. The immediate aftermath of the gala unfolded with a predictable ferocity. News traveled fast within the city's elite circles, and the story of Lily's dramatic exposé and Mr. Sterling's subsequent public humiliation became the week's most scandalous gossip. The media, catching wind of the scandal, descended with predatory glee, plastering headlines about the billionaire's fall from grace and the maid's daughter who wielded words like daggers. The pressure mounted swiftly on Mr. Sterling. His company's stock took a nosedive, investors questioned his leadership, and legal inquiries surfaced regarding the financial discrepancies Lily had so casually mentioned. Cornered and with his empire teetering, Mr. Sterling had no choice but to capitulate. He issued a formal, albeit grudging, public apology to Maria, admitting the false accusation and attributing it to a misunderstanding. The apology, broadcast across major news networks, was a hollow gesture, yet it served its purpose. Maria's name was officially cleared. The stain of the accusation which had so deeply wounded her was finally washed away. The relief that washed over Maria was palpable. The weight of injustice, carried for so long, lifted from her shoulders. Her health, which had suffered so much under the stress, began its slow, steady recovery. The dark clouds that had gathered around their small home dispersed, replaced by the gentle light of vindication. Then came the yacht. True to his word, albeit with every fiber of his being resisting, Mr. Sterling initiated the transfer of his prized possession. The sleek, luxurious vessel, once a potent symbol of his unassailable wealth and arrogant power, was now legally Lily's. The irony was not lost on anyone, least of all Mr. Sterling, who had to endure the ignominy of handing over the keys and the official documents to the very young woman who had orchestrated his public downfall. Lily stood on the deck, a quiet, almost serene presence, as the papers were signed. She felt no particular thrill, no desire to revel in the opulence. The yacht was merely a tool, a means to an end, a weapon she had wielded to achieve justice. Mr. Henderson, standing beside her, offered a rare, approving smile, a silent acknowledgement of her strategic brilliance. Lily, however, had no intention of embracing the lavish lifestyle the yacht represented. She conversed at length with Mr. Henderson, outlining her vision for the future. Her eyes, which had once held a quiet determination, now shone with a clear, purposeful light. She decided to sell the yacht. The transaction was handled discreetly, ensuring the best possible price. With the substantial proceeds, Lily established the Maria's Legacy Foundation, named, of course, after her mother. The foundation's mission was clear and uncompromising: to provide legal aid, advocacy, and support for domestic workers and other marginalized individuals who had been unjustly accused, exploited, or denied their rights. It was a direct response to the suffering her mother had endured, a promise that no one else would suffer in silence as Maria had. Maria's health, buoyed by the clearing of her name and the profound pride she felt for her daughter, improved dramatically. She watched with a renewed sense of purpose as Lily, with Mr. Henderson's invaluable guidance and mentorship, transformed into a respected advocate for workers' rights. Lily's intelligence, her exceptional memory, and her newfound public platform proved to be formidable assets. She spoke passionately at conferences, advised legal teams, and tirelessly lobbied for legislative changes that would protect vulnerable workers. The quiet young woman who once dreamed of simply clearing her mother's name now championed a cause far larger than herself, her voice a beacon of hope for many who felt voiceless. The story of Lily and Maria became an inspirational tale, echoing through communities and media alike. Their small home, once shadowed by hardship, became a place of peace, laughter, and intellectual discourse. Maria, no longer burdened by the past, found joy in simple pleasures, in her garden, and in watching her daughter blossom into an extraordinary leader. Lily, for her part, remained grounded, her success never eclipsing her humility or her core values. The yacht, once a symbol of Mr. Sterling's hubris and a prize won in a battle of wits, had been transformed into a powerful engine for positive change. It was no longer about a material possession, but about the profound impact its sale had on countless lives, a testament to Lily's unwavering determination, her profound integrity, and her unyielding commitment to justice. They looked towards a future filled with hope and purpose, not just for themselves, but for all those they now had the power to help. Lily had not only cleared her mother's name and restored her dignity, but had also transformed a deeply personal injustice into a movement, a powerful force for good in the world. The echoes of, "Say this without mistake and I'll give you my yacht," had faded, replaced by the resonant impact of a daughter's love and a mother's vindication, proving that true power lay not in wealth or arrogance, but in truth, courage, and an unwavering spirit. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales, and click the bell icon to never miss an update. Check out our next video, where we explore another incredible true story of triumph over adversity.